guys, it's Sam, and I think this is my final of the New Year's videos. I tend to always make this one the last one. This is my 2021 Book Awards / Superlatives. I've done this for a few years, even before I was doing like dedicated favorites videos, because it allowed me to talk about books beyond just my favorites. And I find this to be especially important this year since my favorites I don't think will be standout favorites, as in lasting multiple years as like something in my heart. So this year I'm kind of doing a mashup. I've done the Book Awards every year, and that was a tag that Kayla of Bookadoodles, formerly of Bookadoodles, did, and I have been doing that tag. But then this year I also saw Mara of Books Like Woe's Superlatives video, and I'm combining because I liked some of the, well, a lot of what Mara did with her superlatives, but then also some of the questions in the awards videos, and some of them also overlap. So I'm doing kind of a mix of both to get a nice combination of books to talk about. So first question is favorite male protagonist. And I read so few male protagonists, and I do a lot anyway, but so few, especially this year, that there were very few to even choose from. This might have been the only book that I read that had actual male protagonists. That is Royce and Hadrian from the Right Area Revelation series by Michael J. Sullivan. I read the last 2 books in this series this year, and these two are just, they are the grumpy and sunshine best friends, and they're thieves. They're a joy. Then we have best female protagonist. I reread the Monstrous series, or I didn't reread. I mean, I caught up on 1 additional volume, and I think I need like 2 more to actually be caught up with the series. But Micah, half-wolf in this, who is the protagonist of this, she's one of my favorite female protagonists continuously. She is this essentially like race of person that is part human, part magical creature, and she has basically a parasitic eldritch being attached to her. It's fun. Similar vein, my other favorite female character this year was Harrow from Harrow the Ninth. You're gonna see this book on this list a few times. Harrow is in the first book, Gideon the Ninth, as well, which is a book I read last year, but she's the main character of this book, and in this book she is an unreliable narrator because she has fully lost her grip on reality for a few reasons, and so this entire book is a wild ride. But I do enjoy Harrow as, again, a grumpy lesbian necromancer in space. Then best cover. There were no covers, like most covers, I said this last year as well. Most covers these days for especially adult fantasy and stuff are nice. I have seen very few truly ugly covers, and for some of you that are like, well, this cover, listen, if you were not here around like 2014 before, you don't know what ugly covers look like. But I think the prettiest cover that I read this year was possibly A Deal with the Elf King. I really like these covers, this sort of like fantastical thing. I feel like we're getting away from these, and I like these actually, especially for like fantasy romances. I know that especially like the ACOTAR series, like they redid those covers, and so they're changing. I like these. I think this evokes a fantasy romance feeling, and I like them. I also didn't really get a chance to talk about this book at all in any other category, but this book is one of the only books that I actually considered raising the rating for when I was looking through and going through books for my superlatives for this year. Not because I do think it's like the best written thing, and I know some people will be like, I hated that book was horribly written, because I got some of those comments about that when I first did my reading vlog for it. This book I've like surprisingly remembered and like felt positive feelings about. It was like really addicting to read. So if I can read more fantasy romances like this, and I actually want to read the next book in this companion, which is now out, I think I'll be pretty happy with that. So yeah, I actually kind of liked this, but the cover's really pretty too. Then we have best male and female sidekick. I truly don't know if this really counts as a sidekick, but one of my favorite male, like not main characters, sort of a sidekick, sort of a love interest, is Sal from Legendborn. Legendborn will come up again later, don't worry. I find him really intriguing. Is he the dark-haired, broody, mysterious, potentially kind of evil, but he's not really evil, potential love interest? Sure he is. But I haven't had one of those that I've really liked in a while. But as far as male and female side characters, this is actually the same series that I mentioned last year. This is one of the only cast of characters that I really read about, like multiple POV stories that I read this year, and that is all the characters from Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. These are fun little ensemble casts, and there's a ton of side characters, and these are some of the only side characters that I read about this year that I really liked. A common complaint that I noticed when I was looking through my list of books that I read was that a lot of the side characters and a lot of the books that I read this year were fairly flat or just like wooden, a little bit two-dimensional. These, although there are way too many, especially if we add in characters from like the previous books and stuff. It's too much. But like these main, 8 or whatever that you do sort of follow a little bit, I tend to like all of them. I think it's a good time. Then most unique plot and world is actually the question here, but I chose these mostly for world. And first is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I just really liked how in this standalone, all of these different POVs tied together really well. You have people in this fantasy world from like sort of all different parts of this world a little bit, and how their stories all end up intertwining, and then just the fact that there's like, it's a very dragon-based kind of world, there's different kinds of magic. Like there's a lot that this world and this setting had going for, in addition to just being a really good book. Then I'd also say Harrow the Ninth. You really can't get more interesting in the world building than this sci-fi fantasy necromancy book. Like, you're in space, there's fantasy magic elements, there's a ton of bone shit and body horror and just wild stuff that goes on in this world, not to mention the plot and everything else. So as far as an interesting plot and world, like, this book definitely takes the cake. Best writing. This one was kind of challenging for me, actually, because this year there weren't any books that stood out as far as like the writing quality in both the way that it's put together and the prose. Usually I have books, all of my high fantasy books that I typically read, and I'm gonna read more this year. Typically those books will fall into like, oh my god, the writing is like so good. And this year I didn't really have as much of that. So what I use to evaluate good writing is slightly different than I have in previous years. The first of these would be Heir of No Wrong, particularly the last part of this book, because this is actually 2 books bound up. And the reason for this is not that the writing is at all super like complex or anything, or like lyrical or beautiful or any of that, but the way that Michael J. Sullivan tied up this series was very satisfying. Like, he brought everything back in, stuff from like all of the previous books, characters from all the previous books, all of that, and really like tied it all up in a way that was really satisfying writing wise. The other series I would say is the Carl's Duology by Hank Green. This is not going to stand out to me as like a favorite series of all time. However, I really like what Hank did writing wise as far as his depiction of online culture is the best I've ever read. Makes sense. Hank Green is a very online person, but that was done so well considering that I've read so many books with like online culture. One of the characters is sort of like an online person, and the author does not know anything about it, and so it comes off so cheesy and hokey. He did that really, really well. And then just the kind of first contact story and how people would behave poorly, how fame goes to people's heads, like just the thematic discussion of this series is really good. I didn't connect quite as much as friends of mine to like the rest of the plot or the characters, but the themes here are really good. Then here's some superlatives I took from Mara, which I really liked, and that is most correctly hyped, most overhyped, and most underhyped thing that I read. I love that. So first is most correctly hyped, and for this I would say The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I really liked this. It was one of my favorite books of the year. However, I feel like especially where it's sitting right now, it's like a correct amount of hyped. I feel like it got to a point where you were only hearing positive things. I read it before all the hype started, but then you were only hearing positive things, and now you hear a mix of positive and negative things, and I feel like that's accurate. Like, the people that like it make sense, the people that don't like it, like the hype feels appropriate for it now. Most overhyped, I have 2 here. Both of these might piss people off. Well, the first I've already talked about negatively, and that is A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. This is one of the reasons that I don't trust the smut side of TikTok, I will say. I really like a lot of book talk, and I'm discovering more book talk creators, and it's very, very fun. However, anyone that reads primarily smut over there, they're just not, they don't have my same tastes. It's not that they're like, I don't think that they're lying. I don't think that they're like overhyping things purposefully. I think that they truly do like these books. For me, this is garbage. So the fact that this was like so hyped and I never heard a bad thing about it until I read it, boggles my mind. The second one, and hopefully no one that would be super into this would have lasted this long in this video, but Dune by Frank Herbert. Overhyped. Here's the thing, before you start typing your little comments with your little fingers, I understand where Dune sits in its like cultural influence, and its influence of sci-fi, like what he was trying to say, whatever. I get all of those things. However, I do think we've moved past the need for Dune. Was it groundbreaking for its time? Was he saying something really complex and mind-blowing for his time? Sure. However, there's been better stuff written more recently with less problems. And so whenever I run into somebody that is like super vehemently about Dune, it tends to be men who've only read a certain kind of sci-fi, or have only read maybe like Dune and Lord of the Rings. Like, and Lord of the Rings is fine. Nothing, I don't want to bring Lord of the Rings into this. But it always is a red flag to me. That's like, if you haven't read something more recent, maybe something that, sure, could have been influenced by Dune, but people are doing the same kind of thing thematically better more recently. So I don't want to hear about Dune being like the best sci-fi ever. No, it was good for its time. We don't need to hold on to canon books as hard as we do. And it's not that I didn't understand it. I understood it perfectly. There's been other authors since who have done it better. Then most underhyped. That would be Keturah and Lord Death by Martine Levitt. This has a bit of a cult following, I would say, and people definitely know about it. It's an older sort of YA story, before YA was like necessarily like the genre that it is now. But this is sort of Death and the Maiden, Hades and Persephone, not quite Beauty and the Beast, but like that kind of vibe of story. And I really dug this. The writing is really good. And then the story has almost like a fairy tale quality to it. And how we get to sort of the end and stuff is just like really well done, and sort of the themes there. So while this is definitely well known among certain people, I would say it's generally very underhyped, and more people that are looking for like the Hades and Persephone, Death and the Maiden story should read this. Then what was my biggest reading accomplishment? This doesn't feel like a big accomplishment, but I know that it is. And I talked about this in my goals wrap up. I did finish 5 series this year. I didn't necessarily hit a lot of my goals, and there was nothing that was super, you know, I wrapped up a certain large series, or I read a bunch of 1,000-page books, or what. I didn't do any of that. And not that you have to. Not that every accomplishment has to be grand. But finishing up 5 series this year was a good accomplishment for me, especially considering my reading year. And lastly, favorite new to me author. I have 2 here, and this will come as no surprise because they are 2 of my favorite books for the year as well. Tracy Deonn of Legendborn. I feel a little bit like, oh, you've only read 1 book by her. Can you really say like a new yes. I'm gonna trust pretty much everything she writes from here on out, I'm pretty sure. And next is Samantha Shannon. She's definitely an author that now I want to check more out by. The Bone Season has been something that's been recommended like kind of over the years in like fits and starts on BookTube, and now having read this, I'm like, okay, I really like your writing. She also could have been mentioned in the like best writing category, but I really like your writing. I need to read more by you. So I'm pretty hyped about The Bone Season, although I am a little bit skeptical now because people are saying that like the last book ended on not like a bit of a cliffhanger, I don't know. And so do I want to catch up now? I don't know. But will I really catch up with The Bone Season just this year? No, I will not. So Samantha Shannon, anyway, is an author that I really enjoyed that was new to me. And that is it for my 2021 book awards and superlatives. So comment below, let me know some of your answers to these questions. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.